This is All Ears. Well, hello there. I am Everett Hopfner, pianist, new music explorer, and the host of this podcast. On each episode of All Ears, you will hear conversations with my musical friends, mentors, and the many people who inspire me. This is episode number 15, and for a special treat, I've got two guests this time around. It is a husband and wife team of American soprano Christie and German clarinetist Felix Behringer. Christie and Felix make up two halves of the Noise Bridge duo, which explores new and experimental repertoire for their unique instrumentation. Christie and Felix are dear friends of mine, and we recorded this conversation after a simply delightful breakfast at their home in Stuttgart. Let me officially welcome you to All Ears, and thank you both for joining me.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Who are you?
I am Felix Behringer. I'm a clarinetist. And I am your friend.
And who is this person to my left?
I'm Christie Finn. I'm a singer. And I'm also your friend.
Why am I interviewing two people at once?
Because, we're married.
Oh, so you two know each other then?
Indeed.
A little bit, yes.
Indeed, but, you know.
In concerns of the podcast.
Yeah, we're both professional musicians that have a duo together.
So you're partners in life and you're partners in art.
Exactly.
Partners in crime.
Partners in crime.
Let's just leave it at crime.
Let's talk a little bit about each of you, and then also how you operate as a team. I think there's lots to explore here with two musicians. Christie, just a bit of basic background stuff. Where did you grow up?
I grew up outside of Philadelphia in a town called Kennett Square. It's 1 square mile, and it's the mushroom capital of the world.
So how and when did music enter into your life?
Well, I was always singing, according to my family. There's like this tape of me singing, like just singing church songs for I don't even know how long, when I was like 2 or 3 years old. I guess my parents just turned on like a tape recorder and they just like, because I would just constantly be singing. So it was never really a question of whether I was going to do music. It just kind of happened, just kind of always there.
Mm-hmm.
So it just was a natural development from choir to taking voice lessons to singing. And I also took piano lessons too for 9 years when I was a kid and teenager.
And so you kind of took advantage of the typical kind of small town opportunities that are there for singers, like local choirs and high school things.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you do things outside of town, or when did you start to kind of look at this a bit more like seriously and start to think of this as a vocation?
Well, like in the U.S. you have district choir and then regional and then state and then like East Coast, whatever, like the whole East Coast. And so I did all of those several times. But that was basically, I didn't really go beyond that until I went to college. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it really started when I was in college to be beyond just like Pennsylvania, basically.
Felix, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Weilheim, which is in the southern Black Forest, next to the Swiss border, southwest Germany. And yeah, Weilheim is a smaller city, not a city, a village actually, of like 800 to 1,000.
How and when did music enter into your life?
Well, I have 3 older brothers, so we're a bigger family, and music was always around in my family. My parents sent us to the music school from early ages on. Like at 5, I had like some musikalische Früherziehung, like elementary music education. And then from then on, like all of us, my brothers and me, we could choose an instrument that we wanted to play. I was always interested in the clarinet because my oldest brother, who's a pianist, not professionally, but at that time he was playing the piano. He was playing with a friend who was a clarinetist, and she let me like blow into her instrument, and that was like a love at first sight. And yeah, and I mean, after elementary music education, then it was like the recorder for 2 years, like obligatory, mandatory, and then yeah, first the smaller clarinet, and then the bigger clarinet, and
They make small clarinets for kids?
well, you have clarinets in C that are a little small.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't even know, like,
Yeah.
because you
That's
have,
funny.
like you get violins that are smaller size for
Yes.
small children, but I
Yes.
didn't realize that you can also start clarinet on a
Well,
smaller
it's not the
instrument.
real clarinet then, because you could not, or you cannot play the regular clarinet parts, which are in B flat.
Mhm.
But I mean, for little kids, it's cool.
That's great. When did you decide to pursue music as a career?
That was actually quite early. So after I had my first clarinet lesson years, after 3 years, I almost stopped playing the clarinet because I don't know, I didn't practice enough, and my parents were like, either you start practicing again or you're gonna quit or something. And that was kind of harsh, I thought. So I really practiced more, and I had a changed my teacher. And that second teacher I had was really great and motivated me a lot, and I did a couple of competitions and they turned out great. And then I just got so much into music that I started to study in a pre-college kind of situation in Zurich already, because that was only an hour away from Weilheim. And yeah, from then on it was kind of clear that I'm gonna end up in music.
So you were already in Zurich before you officially started your post-secondary studies. Did you stay there for your first degree?
Yes, I stayed there for my undergrad. So after I finished high school, I stayed there for another 3 years until 2009. That was when I was 23.
Sure.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I finished my bachelor's there, and then I was already studying in Zurich for 6 years, and I thought I really need a change now. I mean, of course, if I would have stayed, that would have been really comfortable and the kind of lazy thing to do. But I thought, yeah, why not? And the summer before I finished my undergrad, I met a bassoonist from New York. Actually, he's living in Washington State, but he's teaching in New York in that contemporary performance program at Manhattan School. And he was really into my playing, and he was super cool. And he said, like, you know what, just fly over and try the auditions. Maybe he has a good feeling. He said, you might get a good scholarship and just come over and try. But do it in person. Don't send in a DVD. And yeah, that's exactly what I did, and it turned out great. I got a good scholarship, and so I went for my first master's to Manhattan School of Music in New York.
And this was which year again?
That was 2009.
2009.
For masters, yeah.
Let's put you in some geographical context, Christie. So where did you do your undergrad?
University of Maryland, Baltimore County, which is in Baltimore, of course. Yeah, I did that there, and I got into music because I didn't know this when I applied there, but they are specialized in research, that university. And so every department has to have research, so that means the Department of Music is all new music faculty, basically. Most of them are from UCSD, so they've done their doctorates in some sort of new music situation. And that's kind of how I got into new music. But anyway, after I graduated there, then I thought, well, I still want to study classical voice. So I did a master's in classical voice at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. And that's where I was until 2009. When I went to Manhattan School of Music, also for the Contemporary Performance Program.
So you both took your own paths through training, through discovering new music, and you end up at the same place at the same time, first in 2009 when you were both in Manhattan for the Contemporary Performance Program. Felix, just to go back a little bit, can you tell me how you got into contemporary music?
Yeah, that's a little special. You know, in Germany you have these educational projects for contemporary music. So one of my high school music teachers turned out to be a composer who studied with Behringer. And he was doing a lot of contemporary music with us. I think he also liked our class a lot. So he gave a lot of personal information and tried to project the personal interests on us too. So we did a lot of composition projects and also competitions with the class, and that was a lot of fun. And I actually, at that time, I was not so much into contemporary music, but of course, all that talking about it opened my mind. And I think that's the first step. It's actually also when I met Christoph Löser for the first time. Christoph Löser is the director of the contemporary ensemble or the contemporary program of the Musikhochschule in Stuttgart. He's a good friend of my high school teacher at that time, and he also came to do a couple of special projects. That's where it all started, but throughout my undergrad, I also ended up playing a lot of contemporary music because I was open enough to do it. And also my major teacher in Zurich, he's also very open-minded. Whatever you want to do as a student, he supported you in that field.
So let's now go to Manhattan in 2009. How soon did you two meet each other?
Well, right away, because we were in the same program.
How big is that program?
Very small. It was maybe 14 people in
gosh.
total.
Okay.
So there were 7 people in our class and 7 in the class ahead of us, I think.
How did your relationship develop from working on music together to being a romantic partnership? How did that develop?
That's actually a little funny story, actually, because we were a couple before we actually heard each other sing or play.
So this was like, oh, hello, we're together now.
Yeah, that's exactly how it was. We were together after we knew each other for maybe like 2 weeks.
Oh.
Yes.
So why don't you just guide me through a bit of your time in Manhattan and maybe some of the highlights along your time there, other than spending the time in each other's arms?
Yeah, of course. So within the program, I think we had 6 concerts a year. Is that right?
Something like
About
that. I mean,
6
like
concerts?
1 concert per month, basically, for the length of the entire academic year.
And 3 times a week we had ensemble rehearsal for 3 hours, Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And of course it depends on if the work really needs clarinet or soprano, if you're in every work or not. But it's quite a lot to do because you have to prepare the stuff, and contemporary music you have to invest a lot of time to learn it. So the studies, at least for me, it was very time fulfilling. Yeah. Other than that, yes, I enjoyed the city a lot. That was one of the best things of my time in New York, is all the advantages, all the concerts you can go to, all the museums, and just the city itself, just to walk around. That was a really great experience, to go from like feeding the poor on the street on the one side of the city to like going to the skyscrapers where the stock exchange is, and like did all these huge gaps, all these huge differences on one island. And then, of course, the climate with it that comes with it. I mean, it's such an adventure. Both years were such an adventure. And I had, after 1 year of studying there, I had a change in teacher to Charles Neidig, who is also teaching at Juilliard and at Menace. Charles Neidig is just a great teacher. He's not specialized in contemporary music, but he is so musical. And what he taught me, and I think that is so important, is that I go and work on my personal talents, what I can do the best and what makes me special as a clarinetist. Of course, he taught me how to play pieces. But I think what I really learned, and that's probably also because he himself is he's a mannerist in a way. And just by interacting with him, I got this idea like, you don't have to fit in a box. You have to play with the specialties, with your special talents.
Was it an adventure for you too, Christie?
Oh yeah, totally. It's not an easy city to live in. As much as it's a very exciting city and it's worth all the effort you put in, it's very much a struggle to live there. And I worked a lot when I was there, not just like as a singer, but also to kind of keep myself financially afloat. So I was working quite a bit. But yeah, the people that I met and the opportunities and just like all the connections I made in my own life, it was really amazing. It was an amazing time.
So you both finished your program in Manhattan at the same time?
2011, yeah.
2011. How do you decide what the next step was?
Well, I just went for it and tried the audition for the International Ensemble Modern Academy. So I flew over to Frankfurt to take the audition, just like 3 days or something. And that turned out great. I got the job. So my future for the next year was set. It was all organized. It's like I was a member or a scholar of the Ensemble Modern Academy in Frankfurt.
And for you, Felix, that's great. And it also means kind of, in a way, going home, going back to your home country and crossing the ocean.
Yes.
But Christie, how did you feel about what that meant for you too and for yourself?
Well, I kind of always, I knew that New York was not like a permanent decision for me. I thought if I can't live in New York, then there's no real place for me in the U.S. at this point. Maybe in the future at some point, but I wanted to be a performer, and I had a lot of connections in Europe because I used to go to summer programs in Europe almost every year. I'd find a way to get some sort of like summer scholarship and bend over backwards to get like $1,000 to fly myself over and live off of whatever I could buy at the supermarket to just be in Europe. So I had lots of connections, and in 2010 when I went to Darmstadt, I was talking to my voice teacher there, Donna Cien, about how I could potentially end up in Europe a year later. And she recommended that I be in touch with this group in Amsterdam called Vocal Lab. They changed their name. They're actually called Silberzee now. But I applied to Vocal Lab just to kind of be a practicant, someone to be around and fill in things. They used to have an actual program for young singers, but at that time they had lost a lot of funding because of the government change. So they didn't have that much money to offer me, but we figured out a way to get a scholarship and some money, and so I came over and worked with Vocal Lab for 5 months, right outside of Amsterdam in Zaandam, and love Holland. I love Holland. I had an amazing time. It was also a little bit rough because it was a huge learning curve for me. So I was understudy for this hip-hop breakdance opera that they did with this breakdance group called Ish. And so I'm not, there are a lot of things that I'm talented at, but I'm not so talented at movement and dance, in a way that is sometimes inhibiting. So, that was really good for me to do that. And then I went back to New York, because I had several projects to finish up there. Anyway, to fast forward, I met someone from Stuttgart, my voice teacher, who I currently work with as well, when I was in Amsterdam, because he conducted some of our concerts, and I took some lessons with him. And he recommended I try and come to Stuttgart for this new music theater studio that they have at the Hochschule. So I wanted to find a way to get a visa, stay in Europe, and, to work with him further and to continue my art and make more connections. So I ended up getting into that studio in 2012 and moved to Stuttgart, where I am now.
So that time when you were in Frankfurt and you were hopping between Amsterdam and New York, how did that feel for you guys? Was it okay? Did you feel still strongly connected, or was it difficult with the distance?
Well, I was very busy with the academy. As a clarinetist especially, clarinet is in almost every contemporary work. So I was my whole time I spent either preparing works for the academy or in rehearsals. So I was super busy, and it worked out good for me. I mean, I was distracted for most of the time. I don't know, I think you had a harder time.
Well, I think it's fair to say that both of us are very independent people. I had a harder time going back to New York because my life in New York was always with Felix. So, I mean, Amsterdam was fine. Amsterdam was also a struggle just because, it was pushing me a lot. So, and I didn't know Dutch that well, so I was always trying to, like, kind of keep up with that learning curve as well. But I was also in a very transitional year, and I had a lot of work. I had plenty of work to do, but, and not in the way that was so organized like Felix, that it could distract him in a way from any kind of personal, if he had time to think about his personal life, there wasn't really any time for that at all.
Right.
But it's still very fair to say that we're very independent people, and we function fine just apart from each other as well. But we did come to that point where we thought, yeah, it's not really worth it to live apart anymore.
Yes.
So after 1 year, 1 year was definitely enough.
So after that year, you had organized a place for yourself here in Stuttgart. How did that work with your plans?
Actually, very well. Because after that year in Frankfurt and being in school for almost 10 years, I really was ready to experience the real life. And with Christie moving to Stuttgart and my time in Frankfurt ending at the same time, of course, that was kind of obvious that I would come to Stuttgart too. And I started my freelance career here.
Christie, can you describe your period of adjustment from maybe your more familiar life in the USA to some of the new challenges you had to face in Europe and in Germany in particular?
Yeah, I mean, the one challenge that I still struggle with, I think, a little bit, is that is the language, because it's close to English. I mean, German is close to English in a lot of ways, but it's still difficult. And studying in Holland, I really could get away with English almost all the time. And I knew that coming to Germany, I really couldn't get away with English, and I really love languages, so I push myself, but I still feel like I'm partially incompetent in German, although I think I speak fluent German. I make a lot of mistakes, but, and I understand pretty much everything at this point, but I would really still like to find time in my life at some point, to work on my language skills. And of course there are the general cultural differences too. Just one quick difference is that for me, like, I was very used to this culture in New York that's very do-it-yourself. And I think that that's a bit different here in Germany. It's, people like Felix are on that same bandwagon. And a lot of people who come from an international background too. But the culture itself is not so, they don't quite understand that concept.
What do you mean by do-it-yourself?
It's harder to kind of put together a concert yourself without having some sort of institutions involved or some very heavy planning. Whereas in New York, it was, maybe you don't make a lot of money off the concert, but it's not that difficult to put together a concert.
Sure. Well, we've covered a lot of your background. Let's start to get into your current practice as practicing artists and some of the things that you're doing now as interesting artistic projects. Can you tell me about the Noise Bridge duo?
The Noise Bridge duo is a soprano and clarinet duo.
Now, how did you choose that instrumentation?
No, we just realized that we both have very similar artistic ideas, and we wanted to commission pieces from some of our friends that were just written for us. And we realized that we generally work pretty well together. We have our moments, but we are a pretty good team on stage as well. So, but most importantly, we have similar artistic goals, and we both especially love working with composers. I mean, for us, that's one of the top things that we do as a duo is we choose composers that we know. We choose composers that want to work with us, that we can have a dialogue with, and we can all shape the pieces together. And we try and choose a wide variety of composers as well, so that we can explore all different directions of contemporary music at this point.
We love to work with composers. We love to be invested in the process of the composition. So some of the pieces are developed rather than composed. One very good example for that is the composition Tandem by Chris Fischer-Lochet, which took him 2 years, I think, to compose that piece. We started to work together when we were still living in New York, and we played the premiere in March 2013 in Chicago. And in that piece, well, first of all, he met with us, he took the time, we recorded a lot of stuff back and forth, we had a lot of Skype calls, we met each other in person in Darmstadt 2012, worked there again with him. Then Christie was also providing the text to the composition. She loves to write poetry. Well, she did that much more when we were living in New York, but you still do it.
I just don't have time.
You don't have the time.
The last 2 years have been, I want to write more in the coming years.
So that's the ideal pieces that we want to play. But there are also pieces that are just, composers say, we want to write for your duo, and then that's also okay.
Great, so you have this wonderful collaboration as a duo, but you're also, as you've said, Christie, you're both very, very independent-minded people, and you have your own projects as individuals. So let's maybe get into some of the things you've been able to do as individual entities, shall we say. Christie, I remember a while back seeing you in the school, and you had this look of joy and terror on your face. What brought you to China?
Right, so like about 1.5 months ago, almost 2 months ago, I got an email from a very good friend of mine in New York, who's also a conductor, and he was asking me if I could fill in for a soprano in an opera production in China that was taking place about a week and a half later.
What language was this opera in, Christie?
English and Chinese, half-half.
How's your Chinese?
Oh, it's not good. I did my best. Yeah, so, I mean, I think that's a product of, especially of being in New York, is when you meet a lot of people, they end up doing a lot of projects as you end up doing a lot of projects and being connected with all over. And so New York will always find you at some point, which is very exciting for a musician who's lived there and then doesn't live there anymore. So anyway, he called me in, and I thought, okay, like if I can get the visa in time, then I will do it. And I have no idea how this actually happened, but I managed to get the visa in less than a week, even during 2 days of train strikes in Germany, going to and from Frankfurt to get this thing, and put myself on a plane to go to Beijing and learn the opera, stage the opera. We did 3 performances of it. We did a studio recording of it. Yeah, and then I came back, and I could talk about that experience a lot. There were a lot of things that happened there, but it was great to reconnect with all of these people that I knew from New York, and it was a very special opportunity for me.
And how do you feel like you are managing to fit into the local community here in Stuttgart?
Well, it's a great community, especially of freelance musicians, and a lot of us are, of the same generation as Felix and I. So it's a lot of younger musicians who have just finished up all of their school, and they're ready to, really build something with the musical scene here. There's already a very vibrant community for new music, especially, but also just in general for music in Stuttgart. And we've recently started a collective, so a special group for the freelance musicians in new music here. And one of our big projects that I was lucky to be a part of and to help lead was an 18-hour music festival on the summer solstice that was in a park. So the festival started at 5 a.m. and ended at 11 p.m. And there were a lot of really fun things that happened during that time. Felix actually built like this pipe forest where you could listen to sounds of parks from around the world. That was really awesome installation. We had a scavenger hunt in which people of all ages, not just kids, could do pieces by Yoko Ono, very cute little pieces, and then, collect stamps and get a sticker at the end, and it was fun. We did a Stockhausen piece, we did some premieres, we did music and performance art basically all throughout the park. Not really in people's faces, but people who came for a walk in the park, they were really in for something different. So, and most people were completely receptive and they really loved it. So experiences like that make me very happy that I live in Stuttgart.
And Felix, how's it going for you? How do you feel like you're fitting into this community?
Oh, it's going very great for me. Actually, I have a lot of projects coming up, and I just played a lot of projects. Some of them with you, Everett.
Yay!
The Lachenmann Trio, Allegro Sostenuto, that we just played yesterday night. After 1 year of teaching at that music school here in Stuttgart, I decided that that is a lot of fun. Teaching is a lot of fun, and I thought I have a lot to teach to students. So I decided I kind of want to get a teaching diploma too. And they have a very great program in Zurich, where I started my studies like 10 years earlier. And I went back there. I'm there I just finished my second semester there of a master's program in music pedagogy. So I'm doing that. And of course, coming back to Zurich, the people still remember me, and I have a couple of projects coming up there. One of them is playing as a soloist in a show of the contemporary ensemble of the music school, Zürcher Hochschule der Künste, Zurich University of the Arts, in November. But also here in Stuttgart, I have a show coming up in September where I'm playing solo repertoire on a bass clarinet, but not on a regular bass clarinet, but a bass clarinet that is augmented with different sets of sensors, so movement sensors, an air pressure sensor, and every key has a sensor. So those sensors are sending informations to the computer. And normally this instrument, by the way, it's called Sabre, which stands for Sensor Augmented Bass Clarinet Research because it was like a research for the last 10 years, and now they have a prototype that really works well. Normally through those sensors you are able to start, for example, playbacks, to like have special effects. You can send the sound into the room by making the movement with the bass clarinet. More or less like a pool table situation, which is really cool. But of course you can also influence different stuff with the information that arrives at the computer. And I thought, why not having some video art being influenced through these through this data that comes in? That's the field that I'm working in this project, is the video art. And in September, I'm going to have this show in a gallery here in Stuttgart, where I'm going to play 2 traditional solo pieces for clarinet, but with my own video art.
So, Christie, you've been based in Europe now for almost 4 years?
3 years.
3 years.
Almost 3 years.
Is it in your mind to try to keep some connections still with the American scene?
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, not just with things like, what happened in China, and I've been lucky enough to go back to New York ever since moving here several times to perform. And I've also gone back because since 2009, I've also worked for an American foundation called the Hampsong Foundation, So when I started at Manhattan School of Music, I was pretty desperate to get a job, to have some sort of income. So I applied all over the place, and I got a internship with the Hampsong Foundation, just editing content on this website, Song of America. And the Hampsong Foundation is founded and directed by the American baritone Thomas Hampson. And so I took this internship, although it didn't pay particularly well, but I was very interested in the material. At this point as well, we do educational projects with music and history. And mostly with songs, so that means you are dealing with poetry and literature quite a lot. And with the Hampsong Foundation, I've helped, I've kind of moved up the ladder, if you want to call it that. I'm the only person who is the full-time employee for that foundation, so there wasn't really any ladder to climb. It was more like as more projects came along, I started taking on more and more, and it's been wonderful. We've had 2 radio series that are about history and culture as well as music, and we have a couple other projects coming up, educational projects like teachers' workshops that we're doing in the US next year, and a German radio series that's a version of one of our American radio series. So, and it's great working with Thomas Hampson. He's fantastic, just a fantastic artist, scholar, and person.
Regular listeners to this podcast will know that we have a recurring feature named after the great Mr. Rogers that doesn't really have a name. Let us spend a moment together and let us share some stories of kind people who, like Mr. Rogers, have helped us along our own personal journeys of growth and musicianship. Felix, is there somebody who's helped you along the way that you can tell me about?
So many different ones, but maybe one that helped us both, Christie and me, was at our time at Manhattan School of Music, we took actually an analysis class for composers with a man called Nils Vigeland. And Nils Vigeland is just a really amazing person. And I'm thinking I'm speaking for all of the students that he ever taught, that he definitely deserves the title of Sir Rogers, because he's because he is just such an amazing person, like motivating yourself to think about your own life and where do I want to go and how do I make it happen. Like every time I had a specific question about the matter of the class and I had an appointment with him in his tiny corner office, really tiny, you could fit maximum 2 people in there and
City.
300 books and scores. This is it. But, every time I went there with a specific question, I did not get an answer, but after half an hour, I had so many questions about my own life to deal with. He is a great person. Yeah, definitely. But so indirectly helping with my career, finding myself. I think it's very important if you take the path as a freelance musician to really know what you're doing, to really know what you want to do, and you make it happen.
Christie, do you have someone that you'd like to mention?
Oh, well, I mean, I have to echo what Felix said with Nils, but I do have to have kind of a sad story from my end. My voice teacher when I was in college is someone I think about pretty much every day. He was a wonderful, wonderful teacher. He was not really into new music. His name was Dave Smith. He was not into new music at all. Actually, he was a Helden tenor, a fantastic Wagnerian singer. And just so incredibly positive. I never met someone who was so positive all the time. He really thought that I could do anything. It was crazy. And he was just so motivating. In any case, a year after I finished my bachelor's, he was diagnosed with leukemia and then died about 9 months later at the age of 45. And we are in Baltimore, we're starting a foundation to build a scholarship for voice students at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County for the future. So he's still around. We all know he's still around. But he was Yeah, he never was negative, and it's whenever I get the negative voices in my head, I just think about what he would say to me. So
That's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
yeah.
Finally, how can the good listeners of this podcast keep up with you too, track you online, look at cute pictures of you, and so on?
ChristieFinn.com, where you can also find in the Noisebridge section all of the Noisebridge materials that you might need to hire us.
Our personal information about me is on felix-behringer.de.
Great! I will also put links to your websites up on my show notes for this episode as well.
Thank you.
So there'll be a large repository of links for you to click on after you've heard this interview. Felix and Christie, thank you so much for your time today and for welcoming me into your fine home and for having this chat. It's been really lovely.
Well, thank you, Everett. Thank you for the cactus as well.
Well, that is it for this episode of All Ears. Thank you so much for listening. You can follow me on Twitter at evhopf and the show at This Is All Ears. You can subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. Just head to my website at everetthopfner.com and follow the links. While you're there, you can leave some feedback and review the show. It really helps All Ears find even more ears. Just as a programming note, this is the very first episode of the show that I have released from my new/old home base here in Manitoba. Yay! Thank you so much for your patience. I took a few extra days getting this episode up while I dealt with a nice solid blast of jet lag. I am all back on schedule now, so please check back in 2 weeks for episode number 16. And you can also visit my website from time to time. I'm going to have some new videos and some new blog posts up in the coming days if you like that sort of thing. Okay, farewell. More All Ears for your ears and other people's ears in a fortnight. Have a good fortnight.